Hi everyone, I am the Dadgineer here with part 2 of my two-part series about top-down modeling with sheet metal in SOLIDWORKS. The link to part 1 of this series can be found in the description of this video. In part 1, I demonstrated the inserted part method for sheet metal modeling, and in today's video I will be diving a bit deeper and discussing some more technical details about how the inserted part method works. We're going to discuss references and how they work in between the source part and the individual fabricated part files and the assembly. Next, we're going to learn how to replace the source part in each of our individual fabricated parts. And then finally, at the end, we're going to learn what happens when faces are added or removed from the source part. I warned about this last one in my first video, and we're just going to demonstrate what happens and how to fix that if you ever run into the need to do it. So first, we're going to look at references. So let me switch over to my SOLIDWORKS. And now I'm going to open up one of my individual fabricated part files. So let's just open this up, and I want to just kind of show you how these references work. You can see right here is that you can see source part -1, and it's got a little question mark here. Okay, that means that this fabricated part cannot see the source part. The only thing it can see is what this source part was at the last time it was updated. So now I'm going to open up the assembly, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like. You can see all of these individual fabricated parts have these question marks next to them. And they also have it next to the inserted source part in each of them. So what that means is that these references will not update unless the source part is open. That's basically what that means. That question mark means that all of these individual parts cannot see that source part. It can't detect it in the file structure. So the only time that it'll be linked is if all the parts are open. Okay, so that doesn't mean you need to have each individual part file open. You can have the assembly open by itself if it contains all the individual part files you want to update. So let me open up the source part and we'll watch it update. Okay, so now this is open. Now let me click in here and refresh it, and you'll see all these question marks just disappeared, even in the source part. So now these parts are able to see this source part and then be updated by it if I want to make any changes. So one easy way to make this automatic is to insert your source part into your assembly. So let me do that real quick. Okay, let me float it. Let me hide it actually as well. Oh, no, I want to see it. Okay. Let me mate this to the origin. Let me move it right to the top. Interesting. Okay. And then I can make this transparent so it's not going to show up all the time and visually make noise. I can also come down here and I can right click on the source part and exclude it from the bill of materials. That way it's not going to show up in your bill of materials in your drawing. If you want to actually hide it, you could probably make different configurations and suppress it in different configurations, but anyway, that's one thing to have this in here. Your workflow will determine what you do, but it's nice to have it in here so everything will update automatically. So what you can do is you can come in here and let's say we want to make this longer. Let's go to 25. Let's make this taller. Let's make this, let's go 20. Okay, now we've just modified our source part. Let me refresh it. Let me refresh it again. There, I guess you have to refresh it twice. So now you can see that you only had to open up your assembly file if your source part's in it, and then you can make all your updates to all of the parts at once by modifying that source part. So that's just a really quick and easy way to do that. Now let's talk about what happens if your source part needs to get renamed or if you want to completely replace the source part that you're using with a different source part. So let me transition back to SOLIDWORKS and let me exit out of this. And the process will be the same for both tasks. If your source part gets renamed or if you want to just replace it with a different file, it's the exact same process. So let me just show what happens. Let's get out of this SOLIDWORKS. Now let's open this up. Let's go to open. And now let me just rename this. Source part 1 X. Okay? Okay, now that that's renamed, let's just open this up. So now we've opened it and it's got a new name. And now let's open up our assembly. No, because the assembly should have the source part in there. Yeah, so it's gonna be missing. So let's just delete that so it doesn't matter. Okay. So now what's going on is, even though it's open, these individual fabricated parts right here are still looking for this name. There's no, I believe this is the exact same thing that happens also even if you're using PDM. If you move the source part around but leave it the same name, I believe PDM will still leave everything linked. But the moment you change your file name, it changes, because it's not looking at an internal ID, just a little technical info. It's looking at the actual file name. So if your file name changes, it won't be able to see it, and it has to update. So what that means, so now let's jump into how to fix that. So let's exit out of everything. And let's keep in mind, remember, this is the exact same process about whether or not you want to, whether or not your source part file name changes, or whether you just want to completely change it with a completely different file. So what you want to do is, first of all, you want to come up here and click on Open. Then you want to click on your first fabricated part file. And we're going to replace, we're going to update the references from this file to this one. We're going to go source part 2 now instead of 1x. So you want to single click on it, and then down here you can see this button says References. Click on that, and then that will automatically bring this box up. Okay, so you can see it's looking for source part 1 in the name. So double click on this source part 1, and then it'll bring up this automatic browse window, and I want you to click on source part 2, click on Open, then click on OK. And then you do need to open it. So you need to open that part. Okay? Now let's just open up source part 2 as well, so everything will be linked as everything opens. So you can now see that this is now seeing source part 2. Let's replace it and save it, and that looks good. Okay? So now let's repeat this process for each individual fabricated part. Click on that, click on References, double click, source part 2, open. So you can see that's green, that means it's good, it's worked. Open that up, and now it's got source part 2 in there. So you just keep repeating that for each of your individual fabricated parts. I'm going to go a little faster here. Now one more. Let's do this one more time. Nope, we want source part 2. I got lost. Okay, now let's open that up. Okay, everything looks good. Now let's just open up the assembly. And remember, we got rid of that. So let's get that part out of there. And you can see each of these individual fabricated parts have source part 2. And now source part 2 is the part that's linked to them. So then you can just modify that, and then all of the parts will update as well. And then you can also, what we could have done earlier is we could have, yeah, let's do this. Let's replace this with source part 2. All instances. Maybe this might break actually. Yeah, because it's looking for something else. Okay, well, that might not work, but anyway, you can just delete this and insert source part 2 in here, and then you can have this assembly now automatically linked. But that's the process to update the references on your individual part files so that they can see the new source part. Now the final thing I want to show is what happens when we add or remove faces from the source part. This is something I warned about in my first video, that this will break some of the references that we've made, and it'll require a bit more work to clean up. You can still do it, but I just want to kind of show this process right here. So let me go back to my SOLIDWORKS. Okay, now what we're going to do is, this is our source part 2 that we just inserted into all of our fabricated parts. So let's just change its geometry. So right now we have this face and this face. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a cut here, make a 45-degree cut, and then we're going to create a new face, right? And we're going to see what happens. Okay, let's just go on right plane. Now let's go here. Let's make those equal. And let's make that 3 inches. And now let's turn that into an extruded cut through all both. Okay? So there's a new face that never existed before. Okay? So now let us open up our assembly and let's just see what happened when we created a brand new face. Okay, now let's update all these parts. And what happened was you don't see any errors here, but what you do see is you do see that this face that we converted in our individual part file is now smaller because it didn't account for this face. It just shrunk. Same thing down here. So what we have to do now is we've got to decide, okay, we now need to convert a new face into sheet metal. So to fix that, I think I'd like to do this top face, because this top part, because this side part has a lot of bins already and that'd be complicated. So let me open up this one. And let me roll back my feature tree. And let me just convert a new face. There's no bin edges before, so let's make a bin edge. Okay, now let's roll that back down. Really not that complicated. And now let's open our assembly back up and refresh everything. Now, definitely going to need to add a fillet there because we're interfering. But overall, you know, that fixed the problem. Okay, so now I want to show something else. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, now that I've updated this, now I'm going to remove this face. Okay, now let me open up my source part and let's just see what happens when I remove this face. So let me just get rid of this feature I just added and just delete that. So now instead of adding a face, I've removed a face. Let me open up the assembly and let it update. We can see we have this error that popped up. We have rebuild errors. Save. So what's going on? So what's going on is our convert solid feature on this part is missing something. It's missing this edge. This edge disappeared. So that's not going to work. So let's just delete that. This is how we fix it. We just delete what's missing. We don't need the bend anymore. And we're now updated how we should be. Okay? One other useful tool, just as a note, and this will be, you know, what I like to use to add or split faces, is this is you can make a split line. So let me make a split line on this right plane, and let's just see what happens here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a line right there and exit out. Keep that sketch selected and insert curve split line. Okay, I'm going to do a projection and I'm going to project this to different edges. And now we have now split these faces. I'm going to add another split line just for kicks and giggles. And we're going to split the front as well. Okay, insert curve split line. Let's split the front faces. Okay, now instead of one face here, or one face here, we've now split them into two faces. You can see how they're selectable now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save that and then open up my assembly and see what happens. Okay, now we have some red errors. This is a little bit of a bigger deal. Okay. Okay, now our body delete keep feature has failed. Our convert solid has failed. Same thing here. So what we have to do now is we've got to open this up and start modifying things. So what you can do is, if you need to use these split lines to split up a face for whatever reason, you can just roll up here in these parts that are failing, and you can just go into direct editing. I love direct editing because it keeps a lot of things, if you want to move a face or keep a body or split or combine faces, this does it in a really easy way, and it also keeps the faces the same name instead of renaming them. So this is a really useful feature. So maybe that's not the right one. Delete face, this is what we want, okay? We want to delete the faces and replace by extending surrounding faces. Delete the faces and replace with a single face. So I think what I want to do is I want to delete and patch. So let's delete one face on each of these new things that we've made. And now let's see what happens. So that just combined these faces into one. Okay, let's see if that solved the problem. It didn't solve the problem, but it got us one step closer to solving it. So what we'll do here is we'll go into our convert solid, and this was our first part. So what this was the front here, okay? So we have missing bend edges. So right here, let's replace this bend edge. So we've got it selected. Let's replace that with, I'll just delete it. Okay, let's delete this one as well. Oh, we've lost our base. Okay, that's what's going on. Okay. Okay. Just clear all. How about that? Bend edges. Okay, you just have to recreate everything here. So reselect all of your bend edges. Make sure it's extended out, which it is. And then your body delete keep feature just got fixed. So this is just the process. You have to go into each individual part file here, and then you've got to just kind of work through the process of fixing these errors whenever you add or remove a face. So when you get, this is a pretty simple assembly here. So it's not that hard to kind of work through and fix each error. But if you have a really massive assembly, or if your weldment has all kinds of other random parts and things are mated, this can snowball on you pretty quick, and this can become a pretty big job, pretty labor intensive, because you're trying to sift through what's related to what. So depending on what you need to do, a little forethought up front, you make your source part as accurate as you can. So then you don't have to change it by adding and removing faces later. You can just change it by modifying the existing geometry. That's always ideal. But sometimes if you really do need to make a change, sometimes it's almost easier to just start from scratch. So sometimes it's a little easier just to, okay, you know what? I'm just going to create a brand new assembly. So that's up to you. You kind of have to work that out on a case-by-case basis. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope these videos help you and help you improve your modeling. So also please leave any questions down in the comments, and I will see you all in the next video. Thanks. Have a good day.